I think it's safe to say that at this point in time in history, everyone is familiar with the game of Tetris. You've most likely played it in any of its many incarnations released over the past 2 decades or so, or at the very least you've heard of the game. Originally the product of communists, Tetris started life as a simple creation of a humble Russian engineer before being the central focus of a legal pissing match over false licenses and copyright issues, all of which would be eventually resolved and pave the way for Tetris to infiltrate the masses and become one of the most recognizable brands in video games. If you want a more detailed history lesson of Tetris, look elsewhere. There have been many variants of the game released over the years. That much is obvious now given how many different Tetris games and incarnations are out there, but for today's subject matter, we're looking at one of many variants of Tetris to grace the arcades. In this case, it's Tetris by Sega, a version of Tetris that was released to Japanese arcades in 1988 and as such was never released through any official means outside of that country, so the version we're playing here is being maimed. Yeah, sorry. Seeing as this was released in 1988 and the only Tetris incarnation made for the Famicom at the time was the one produced by Bulletproof Software, Sega's arcade variant possessed only one rotation button, which made the piece rotate counterclockwise. Also, when you press down on your joystick, you're merely increasing the descent speed of your Tetris piece as opposed to instantly slamming the piece to the bottom of the well and locking it in place, which was the case with a number of computer conversions and the aforementioned Famicom release at the time. Par for the course, your main goal is to clear away blocks of lines from the well by forming complete lines that will kill the blocks. Every few lines clear, you move up a level and the speed of descent of the blocks will increase a touch more. You know, the usual thing with Tetris. For all intents and purposes, the gameplay of Sega's initial Tetris arcade offering is pretty rudimentary and a step above what came before at least. Sure, one rotation button is a bit of a deal breaker for some, especially for those who are used to more recent incarnations of the game or even those used to the NES or Game Boy versions of Tetris. But hell, being able to freefall or soft drop your Tetromino pieces did speed the game up a bit, a stark contrast to the earlier computer versions and the Famicom release, where your only options were to either wait until the piece landed on the ground or just slammed it in place just to get the next piece, hoping you didn't miscalculate and miss the intended target. Control, all things considered, is functional and straightforward. As far as visuals go, Tetris looks pretty decent for an arcade title, nothing spectacular or anything, but you've got all the major components there. Your playing field is black and slick. The various Tetrominos are simple looking and colorful, and you have some decent quality pictures serving as your backdrops as you play, with the picture changing every time you advance to a higher level. Some of the pictures are Soviet themed, others are based on animals, and they look rather nice. I also like the way lines of blocks simply fade from existence once you fill a line or so. I could do without the backwards R's though. Yeah, we get it. Russia. Backwards. Fine. Got it. Whatever. Only a couple tunes permeate this iteration of Tetris during actual gameplay. The main theme, by the way, can also be heard in the Master System version of Columns, specifically when playing that game's Flash mode. It's alright, it's calm and soothing, it's there. As you get closer to topping out, the tune changes to something more appropriately tense, which also sounds alright. Beyond that, you have a bunch of tinny sounding sound effects and some okay jingles, perfectly acceptable fare, nothing really of note. Right now, this Sega Tetris arcade version isn't easily attainable outside of the questionable MAME route, and the chances of it seeing re-release on more modern formats, especially outside of Japan, are fleeting at best, considering rights and the preference to release new Tetris variants that properly conform to the currently established parameters. Outside of being released only in Japan, I'm not quite sure as to the rarity of the actual arcade board and how much it would fetch for. Probably because it's out of my particular budget range. There is a ported version of the game on the PS2 compilation Sega Ages 2500 Series Volume 28 Tetris Collection, which also includes a couple other Tetris variants that Sega had produced, but to the surprise of absolutely nobody, that one's also Japanese exclusive. There's also a Mega Drive conversion of the game, but it's so goddamn rare it may as well not exist at all. Take that for what it's worth. Now, I've read in a couple places that this particular version of Tetris was quite popular and well known in Japan in its prime years, and there are folks who hold this game in somewhat high regard. The thing is, whenever I do these video review rambling gibberish things, I can only speak for myself and not really for anybody else. And for my part, Sega's 1988 Tetris arcade game is perfectly adequate fare, it's functional, playable, presentable, and enjoyable to a point, but otherwise rather forgettable. It's a game that I almost literally stumbled across by accident, played a few rounds, had a good time with it, and never looked back as I migrated towards other, more accessible versions for my Tetris fix. At best, this is a well-made game for its time, whose intricacies might be appreciated more by those well-versed in Tetris lore, or perhaps some of the finer grandmasters of the game, as some of the elements found here might have served as the basis for some later Tetris incarnations, some of which I've never played, such as the Grandmaster series or something to that extent, I'm assuming. At worst, it's a rather ancient incarnation of Tetris that, quite frankly, isn't really worth the effort in tracking down, nor will it be all that interesting to anyone possessing but a fleeting interest in the series in general. Overall, this version's alright, but otherwise nothing special.